Missouri School of Journalism. Welcome to Global Journalist. I'm Josh Kransberg in for Jason McClure. Every year, a handful of journalists from around the world are selected to be Alfred Friendly Fellows. These journalists are partnered with American news outlets in the hopes that they can learn and help spread U.S. news ideals, namely fair and accurate reporting. Global Journalist was lucky enough to sit down with a few of these fellows, including two from Pakistan. One is Arooj Zhara, part of Geo News. She will spend the next few months working at the Washington Post. Jason McClure spoke with Arooj earlier and started by asking her what Geo News covers in Pakistan.
Thank you very much for having me over here. I work for Geo News. That is a 24-hour news channel in Pakistan. It is like the biggest media group in Pakistan. Jang Group basically has English and Urdu newspaper, and they have got sports channel, and they have got news channel, that is Geo News I work for. So it is like a big group, and I'm an associate producer over there, and I work for a morning show. The morning show has been shut down due to some reasons, but I have been doing political shows as well. I have covered general elections. I have done a lot of live transmissions because when there were general elections, we used to have long live transmissions about the votings and about the results coming in. So I have done that, and I've also produced some of the documentaries for the channel as well.
Now, one story that I understand that you had a lot of difficulty getting on air, and you've done stories on a number of difficult subjects, on Afghan refugees in Pakistan, on street children, on the drug trade. But there was one particular story I was interested in, and this was after the assassination of a governor of Punjab a few years back. Tell us just a little bit about that and about the story that you wanted to do.
Punjab governor, unfortunately, was assassinated by his own security guard because Punjab governor Salman Taseer, he took a stand, and there was this Christian girl, Asiya Bibi. She was wrongly accused of blasphemy. So she was in the prison. Punjab governor took a stand, and he said that at times we have seen in Pakistan that blasphemy law has been wrongly used. People use it to settle their personal scores. So Punjab governor was pushing for certain amendments in that blasphemy law. The amendments were actually he think, and some of the liberals also were on his side, and they thought that, you know, certain amendments should be made in that law which will prevent people from using this law to settle their personal scores, because it has happened in Pakistan.
So people would have a dispute over money, over something small, and they would accuse each other of blasphemy and try to put someone else in jail.
Exactly. That's what happens. So Punjab governor took a stand. His security guard, he killed him in the federal capital of Pakistan. After that, religious hatred, I would call it, it was on the rise. After I covered Salman Taseer's funeral prayers, I covered the protest. It was a small protest. The liberals, they took out a protest rally outside the governor house in Pakistan, and, you know,
this is right after his funeral.
Yes, and very few people showed up because there was a threat that extremists will attack this protest rally as well. I covered that too. After a week, I talked to my boss, and I told him that, you know, I want to do a story, and this story should be about that all the religions in Pakistan, they preach about peace. They preach about respect for others' religions as well. They preach about love, peace, harmony. So I think we should, because this is like a very sensitive time for Pakistan. It is a dangerous time. So instead of sensationalizing the news, we should promote religious harmony. I told him that, you know, I will go to a Hindu priest, I will go to a Christian priest, I will go to a Muslim. And I think I should ask them that what their religions teach them. My boss was taken aback. He said that, you know...
He was taken aback?
Yeah, because...
He didn't want a story on religious
It's not
harmony.
like that. It was because of the time. The time was very sensitive. He said that, you know, if you put all these three religious leaders in one report, people, you know, maybe they won't take it. Excuse me. But I said that I think it is the right time, I should do that. He said, be very careful. I had to convince him for like an hour because he was really concerned about my security. But I went ahead with that. I made a news report, and I talked to the Christians, I talked to Hindus, I talked to Muslims, and I asked them that what their religions teach them. And they all told me that, you know, every religion teaches you to respect others' religion. So there is no place for such stupid or foolish acts that, you know, what you think is right, and, you know, in the light of that perspective, you kill someone. So I made that report. It was very well appreciated. People really liked it. But I started getting some calls after that, and, you know, some of the people were threatening me, but I just ignored that.
Really? So you received threats after making this report?
Yes. Some people from unknown numbers, they would call me, and they would tell me that, you know, because I posted that on YouTube as well. They told me that, you know, you should delete that video. I didn't pay much attention. After a while, those calls stopped, obviously, but it happens.
Let me ask you about a documentary that you made about the tribal areas of Pakistan, where the Pakistani military has been fighting militants. It's also an area where the U.S. has launched drone strikes on suspected al-Qaeda figures, but has also killed a number of civilians in the process of that. What did you find when you went there? How were you received by people in these areas?
I went to South Waziristan. I also visited North Waziristan because last year, Pakistan Army had launched a military offensive in North Waziristan. South Waziristan have been cleared by the army. It is the largest tribal agency in the FATA. FATA is like a federally administered tribal area of Pakistan. I went over there. I was seeing that in media, at times, Waziristan is portrayed as a terror heaven. Even though the people in Waziristan, they are not all terrorists. There are some miscreants, there are some militants over there, I know that. But then, you know, you cannot just brand some of the people as militants. You cannot just say that people in this area are militants. Not everybody is militant. I wanted to clear this thing. I had a story. I came to know that people in South Waziristan, they stitch footballs, and they play football as well. And the footballs they stitch, those footballs are being exported to European leagues.
So they're making footballs, they're stitching footballs and exporting them, and so this was something that you covered in your reporting, that there is some economic activity there.
When I went over there, people were very happy. They received me really well, and they welcomed me. And some of them were very insistent that, you know, I should go there to their home and I should have lunch or dinner with them, because that is their tradition. You cannot just say no to them. So I had to tell them that, you know, I'm short on time and I have to go back. When I went over there, I talked to some of the people who make footballs as well, who stitch footballs in the daytime. And then there was this guy, the hero of my documentary. I followed him. He works in the stitching center during the day, and then he also, after stitching footballs, he also goes to a local FM radio channel. And there was this music, and there were people calling him, and people were happy. I saw that as a very normal activity, things we would do in Lahore, in a big city. So they were like leading their life in a normal way. And that is exactly the picture I wanted to portray, because I wanted to tell the people that not everyone over here is terrorist. And after that FM station, that guy went to a playground and they play football. So they have their leagues over there, they have their football clubs over there, and they play football. And one thing I came to know that they really prefer football, and they really like Messi. And all of them were big fans of Messi.
You mean the Argentine soccer player?
Yes. And I was amazed that they know so much about FIFA and the World Cup, and all of them wanted to give a message to Messi that please come over here, we want to see you, and, you know, you can teach us some techniques. According to those people, they think that football is something which prevents them from terrorism, because they think that when they are free, some of the people, they join terror groups because they don't have anything to do. Now that economic activity has been generated in the area with the help of the army and the civilian government, so they are happy that they can earn money, they can play football, and, you know, this sport is helping them staying away from terrorism.
Now, I understand you also spoke with people who had been affected by drone strikes there by the United States. What is the perception of people in Waziristan of the drone warfare that has been occurring there?
Well, I have talked to a number of people. When I went to this IDP camp, that is internally displaced camp, that was in Baka Khel, that is exactly at the edge of Bannu and North Waziristan agency. When army was, because army was busy in targeting terrorists last year in North Waziristan, I talked to a couple of people in both the agencies, South and North Waziristan. They even showed me several places where the drones had targeted, and the place was devastated, and they have been rebuilding, and army is helping them rebuilding schools and markets and hospitals and everything else, and because the infrastructure was totally destroyed in that area. I talked to them. They are not very happy. They are like okay with the fact that drone at times target militants, but they are not happy that drones also target civilians. We have seen that a number of civilians have been affected because of these drone strikes. So the sentiment, I would say that anti-US sentiment was sort of high in those areas. They were even against the Pakistani government as well, because they think that Pakistani government, along with the help of the US government, they are trying to kill them. So, we need to tell them, and we also tell them, I have told them that the Pakistani government, along with the help of the US government, they are targeting militants. But, they have their own point of view. They say that, okay, fine, you can target militants, but what about the civilians? I met a guy whose grandmother was targeted in the drone attack. She was in her house and she was cooking. And the kids, her grandchildren, they were out playing in the field. And then there was this drone attack and she was killed. So they demand justice. They ask us that what was she doing? She was just cooking in her home. She was just a lady. She was just an old lady, in fact. And she was killed.
Let me ask you about some of the challenges that journalists in Pakistan face, because a number of journalists have been killed there in recent years. How does that affect how you report? How does it affect how you broadcast the news, how you share the news?
There are certain challenges for journalists in Pakistan, especially for those journalists who cover war zones, who cover conflict areas, and who cover terrorism. You see, in 2009, there was a wave of continuous bombings in Pakistan, and several of my colleagues were injured because they would go out in the field and they would cover bomb blast. And it happened that whenever there would be a blast in a certain area in market, when journalists go over there, when people go over there, and when security forces go over there to rescue people, there would be another blast in that same area.
So there would be a second attack after the first one.
In order to target more people. So several of my colleagues, they were injured. They have been injured in those areas, in those attacks. It is very challenging. And it is even more challenging when you report on security issues, when you report about the military. It is dangerous. What should I say?
You're visiting the United States on a fellowship from the Alfred Friendly Press Partners, and as part of that fellowship, you're going to spend time working at the Washington Post in Washington, D.C. What do you hope to accomplish there?
I'm really honored to be here in the US. This is my first time, and I already like the people. People are very nice. They're always smiling, and I think the Americans are, I guess, the happiest nation in the world because they are all the time smiling. So I hope that because at times I have to go to the conflict areas, and I wrote that in my personal statement as well, that I want to learn how to report effectively while saving yourself as well. Because my boss would often say that go, report, give us the news, but don't be the news yourself. Don't get killed. So I wanted to learn this thing, and I also want to learn that there are times when in order to get news, you have to talk to certain militants. You have to talk to them, or you have to send someone and to talk to them. So how to do that? Because at times people would just not open up. So I hope that when I go back to Pakistan after 6 months, I'll be a better journalist, and I want to learn some interview techniques, especially when you go to a conflict area, how to interview people, because they're already scared. They would not open up in front of you. At times they do not want to talk to you because they think that you're just an outsider. You cannot feel their pain. It's very important to learn the techniques of someone who has been in a traumatic situation, who has gone through a trauma. So I really hope that I learn these things.
Arooj Zhara of Pakistan's Geo News, thanks very much for joining us on Global Journalist.
Thank you very much.
This is Global Journalist. I'm Josh Kransberg in for Jason McClure. This week, interviews with international journalists who are in America as part of the Alfred Friendly program, which connects them with U.S. news outlets to help the spread of free and accurate journalism. If you're interested in more Global Journalist content, visit us online at globaljournalist.org. There you can read in-depth articles on international affairs and free press issues and download past episodes from our archive. We're also on social media. You can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at GlobalJourn. Next up is Saher Baloch, also from Pakistan. She's partnered with the Los Angeles Times. Back home, she works in Karachi as part of the Dawn Media Group. One of her biggest breaks came when she helped uncover a mass grave in Balochistan province. She talked with Jason about that story and how it marked a turning point in her professional career.
Actually, I was asked to cover this assignment by my editor, and we were actually thinking of, it was just a small news and at the back page of our newspaper by the district correspondent that a mass grave has been discovered in Khusdar, which is in the south of Balochistan. And I was asked to look into it.
Balochistan is a province in the western part of Pakistan.
In the western part of Pakistan, but this district is in the south of Balochistan, which is basically an ungovernable tribal area, as you can call it, because there's a separatist movement also going on in that area. So I was asked to do like a story from there. We have this column in our back pages called Footprints, which is like a first-hand account of any incident that has occurred in the city or anywhere in the country as well. So at first I thought that the officials won't be helping me so much because of course it's a mass grave and they would be asked a lot of questions. But interestingly, it was the officials, the public officials from the provincial government who had informed the media that we have discovered mass graves, and they informed the Supreme Court as well as the district government that this is what we have found. So that was something that
how many people were buried in these graves?
Well, the numbers is not known because when we went there, they were actually just dumped in the graves. When we went there, it was a town called Tutak, which is like 47 kilometers out of Khusdar. It is a barren land and just surrounded by mountains, and just suddenly we found these graves in the area. We were accompanied by a judicial commission and the FC personnel in the area. And when we went there, there were these graves, 10 in number, and they were all dug in deep, 7 feet, and some of them were like dug in a bit less. And there were nothing left in the grave as it was, because that's what I pointed out in my report later on, that the commission was not that, I think, focused on getting the forensics from that place, because the kind of evidence that you find from the area.
Did you find out who killed the people?
Actually, it's a bit debatable who killed them and why they killed them, because the situation in Balochistan is pretty much complicated. It has a lot of layers in it, and the thing was, which was said by the locals, that a lot of
it's complicated in that there are multiple militant groups, the government.
Yes, there are like multiple militant groups. Then there are some Islamist groups now getting involved in the tribal areas, and then you have the government, which is in my opinion a bit in the middle, like trying to resolve the conflict, trying to be transparent about it, but also being threatened by from within. So that is some of the problem.
How did it change you as a reporter, as a person, to bear witness to a mass grave?
It actually, the first thing that came to my mind was that I need to do a bigger story. Like I need to really get in deep into what actually is happening here, because there were 2-3 things, there were multiple layers to that area, because one side there were the graves, and on the other there was a militant camp. So it was not known like what the intention of these people was. So my first thought was to find what is exactly happening, to be accurate about it, and as well to speak to these government officials that why they chose to speak to the media first. It was quite interesting because none of the media people found it that there was mass graves. And then later on, when we were taken to the Judicial Commission's office, actually it was a sessions court where we went. So the media from the local newspapers were also invited, but they refused to come along with us. Because, as you spoke about the threat in Balochistan, the thing is that, I think there's a disclaimer here somewhere, because as a reporter working in the city, I think it's somewhat easier for me to go there, do my story, and then get back. It gets really difficult difficult for a person who lives in that city to bear witness to such things and then report about it. Similarly,
because the people who committed it presumably are still around or still
yes,
there.
they are around and they can easily come to those people as well. And at the same time, I mean, I'm from Karachi and I report from Karachi as well. So it's just like an Owen Bennett Jones coming to Karachi and writing about the political mafioso and whatever. But it would be really difficult for me if I choose to do something like that on Karachi. So, you know, we have our paradoxes as well. So I can't be, you know, all patronizing about the local journalists not bringing up these issues, because I know the kind of threats they go through and the kind of threats they face, basically.
And Balochistan is one of the most dangerous, perhaps the most dangerous place in the world for reporters.
Yes.
And yet it's not a place that is covered a lot in the international media, in part because the conflicts there are fairly local or regional in nature, as compared with, say, the northern parts of Pakistan, the tribal regions where there is U.S. military involvement and there's spillover from U.S. wars there. Can you tell us just a little bit about some of the threats that you face as a reporter? How do you know when you're reporting on a sensitive subject? Are you threatened directly? What types of problems do reporters face?
I was in Turbat in September last year.
Turbat, this is
the part of Kech district. It is in the southern part of Balochistan, and it is currently going through an insurgency as well. So there was a military operation, and my editor asked me to go and cover it. And you know, the kind of threat, nobody like threatened me directly, but there is this eeriness about Balochistan. You don't know the kind of people you're speaking to, whether you should be speaking to them at all, whether you should be asking for help from the locals, because as a reporter, I need to have someone local to guide me around the area. But in that case, I avoided that, you know, because people tend to report back to the agencies at times, because the intelligence agencies are quite strong in those areas. They want to know what's happening, how the militant groups are doing, and what the reporters are reporting from that area. So when I go to such a place, I won't sort of take my chance on speaking to a local. So
So the threats and difficulties may come from Pakistan's own intelligence agencies then?
At times, yes. At times, of course, that is a huge thing, because, you know, they want to make sure that what is being reported about. There was also a reporter who recently wrote a book about, I think it's called The Wrong Enemy, Carlita Gal. She was also, I think she also went through some problems in Quetta. Because, you know, I think I'll come back to the same point again, because, you know, I would have gotten that story because I did get the story that I wanted to report on, because there were military operations in the area and it actually killed a few locals. But it got really difficult to get the numbers, how many were killed and who were those people, whether they were children, whether they were women, whether they were men. And some of them said, okay, they were men, and some people were picked up from the area. But to get a version from the government about these things can get a bit dicey as well, because the local government will tell you that we have no writ in that area. So why are you even bothering going there? So there is no I feel responsibility from the government side, from the local government side, when it comes to Balochistan, because they are like, you know, we are completely helpless when it comes to that area.
Journalists in Balochistan often publish their stories using fake names, using pseudonyms. I understand reporters sometimes get their cars shot at. There was an incident where security agents broke into the home of a journalist and beat him in front of his wife and children. Have you received either direct or indirect threats?
You know, threats are usually indirect. I mean, I haven't received a direct threat yet, but there are, you know, certain things that you do feel while you're working. It would be a kind word from a stranger at the press club, and he would be like, you know, that, you know, I think you should be taking care about what you report on. Or it would be, at times, sort of, you know, I do feel that my phone is getting tapped, and that is normal of any journalist in Pakistan. They'll tell you that, yeah, my phones are getting tapped or whatever. So this happens, and at the same time, I am very careful about voicing my opinion with even my colleagues. I try very hard not to say things, not to give out my real opinion or whatever, because you never know where that threat might come from, because it might be someone who you think is a colleague or a journalist, but you never know like who they are.
So you can't trust even your colleagues then too?
Yes, that is very true, because, you know, even in Karachi we were discussing, like one of my senior colleagues and I we usually discuss that, you know, how we need to speak to very few people about what we think about. You know, we can't give out our political opinions, our you know, like what we think about a certain situation, because it is very complicated to speak about certain things, because you don't know what people are going to take offense to. And that is the problem, because, you know, I'll just give you an example of this reporter who was killed from GeoTV. His name was Wali Khan Babar, and it is said later on when the investigations were done and everything, it got on.
GeoTV, this is one of the largest television networks.
Yes, one of the largest television networks in Pakistan, and that reporter was killed after his details, his basic details were given from the office.
Like his biographical information?
Yeah, biographical information, his residence, what time he comes in office, what time he goes out, it was given from the GO office. And that also, came out. It was one of the colleagues of his that reported on him.
One of the colleagues of his passed information to the people who killed him?
Yes, it is said so. And this was also reported by the CPJ, who came, I think their members came to Karachi to investigate the matter as well.
And he was killed by whom?
He was killed by, it is said that a political party in Karachi, they killed him, but it is contested a lot. There are a lot of versions that do come out, and it is said that it was personal, or it was not so personal, but what is widely believed is that he was killed by a political party because he was reporting on certain things which were not considered apt from them.
And by various counts, something like 30, 40 journalists have been killed in Balochistan over the last decade. What do you see the future of press and media there? Are things going to get better soon, or are things getting worse?
I think things can get better if you're working if you have your goals intact, your values intact as a journalist. If you really feel like you want to work on something, you can definitely go and do that. But nowadays, I think our organizations have their own interests, specifically the television channels, the news organizations in electronic media, they have their interests that affects their journalists. So I think in that way, I think self-censorship, we'll see a lot of that. And I think when it comes to reporting on certain things, we'll see a lot of freelancers doing that. Because when you're working for an organization, it gets a bit difficult to get to the root of a problem at times. Not out of any danger or anything, but at times because of your own things that you have to cover, your own beat that you have to cover. So I think it depends on journalists themselves, what they want to do and what they want the future to be. Because nobody can, I think, push it on you.
Let me ask you as well about what specific challenges do you face as a woman reporting in Pakistan?
As a woman reporter, since we are culturally very, nice to women, like when you go out, so I've not faced as many challenges when I am reporting on the field. Personally, I've met some really nice and encouraging people. Like my editors have been really, encouraging when it comes to sending me off to all these areas, because I've been pushy myself. I've been taking these initiatives myself. And I was, I think, quite blessed to have met all these people who were equally ambitious of the kind of work they wanted out of me. Like they were not setting limits on me. And I think even as a woman journalist, because I hate this term woman journalist, because a journalist is a journalist anyways, but as a journalist, I think that it all depends on your initiative. If you don't back down, nobody can, sort of push you or, bully you in sort of, succumbing to adhere to all these norms or whatever. I think it depends on you as a journalist.
You're in the United States with a fellowship from the Alfred Friendly Press Partners, and as part of that fellowship, you're going to be working several months at the Los Angeles Times. Tell us, what do you hope to accomplish while you're in the United States and at the Times?
I'm actually really hopeful to write a lot of news features and articles, and because, California I find really diverse, culturally diverse. There are a lot of people from various countries and communities that live there. It would be interesting to see how they are, sort of working there and what they are doing. Because I think one of the things that people really want to read about is about, different cultures that they haven't heard about before. So I would like to sort of focus on that. I really want to achieve a lot over here, but I'm keeping my mind open because I can't sort of predict what I will do eventually. But as of now, I'm pretty hopeful that I will achieve whatever I've set out for myself.
Saher Baloch of Dawn Media in Pakistan, thanks for joining us on Global Journalist.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
That'll do it for this week's edition of Global Journalist, a production of the Reynolds Journalism Institute. Many thanks to Arooj Zhara and Saher Baloch for taking the time to talk with us. Global Journalist Studio Director is Travis McMillan of RJI, and our audio engineer is Pat Akers of KBIA. For all of us here at Global Journalist, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.